Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you.
Oh, don't you know it's the Bill Arnold Show? It's Bill.
And a warm welcome to the Bill Arnold Show. I'm the Bill Arnold part of that short sentence. I know that in our lives, our happiness is going to be kind of dependent on having wonderful, strong, warm relationships. So that means we're going to have to always work on improving how well we communicate with others. And how do we become a better conversationalist? And then how do we create that connection? That's the topic of today's show with Dr. Heather Holleman. She's an associate teaching professor at Penn State. She's written, I think, 8 books, possibly more. One of my favorite books of hers is called The 6 Conversations, Pathways to Connecting in an Age of Isolation and Incivility. Also, her book, Sent, Living a Life That Invites Others to Jesus. And I find her to be absolutely charming, delightful, witty, and insightful. Heather, so glad you're with us today.
Oh, you're so kind. I'm so excited for this conversation. I've been looking forward to it for a long time. Thanks for having me back.
Well, if you weren't on my show right now, what would you be doing?
Well, honestly, I literally 5 minutes ago walked in the door from campus, so I would probably still be on campus hanging out with students at Penn State.
Yeah. One of the things you said, which I have repeated many, many times, you said this to your daughters, is every rejection is God's protection. And I thought that's just such powerful wisdom. And is there something that your mother said to you that sticks with you as much as I'm sure that's sticking with your daughters?
Oh gosh, my mother has said so many wonderful things to me. I like her comment. She said, "Time heals all wounds." I liked that. But by the way, Bill, I have to tell you, a student came to my office last week and said, "Dr. H, how do I handle rejection from all these interviews that I'm getting? I'm getting too many rejections." And I told him our family motto. He loved it. He thought that was so cool, that every rejection is God's protection. No, my mom has a lot of wisdom. She did not just a motto, but one of her best tips for me is to, when you leave the house, always create an atmosphere that welcomes you back. So clean the kitchen, have the beds made, so when you come home at night, your home is welcoming you back.
I like that a lot.
Yes. She's a big believer in the warm welcome.
Okay. I'm slightly better at that when it comes to traveling. If I'm going to be gone for 3 days, I'm pretty particular about making sure the house is about as clean as it will ever be. And I don't know why.
I'm the same way.
But when you come home, you want to go, oh, look at I'm home, and it's clean.
Yep. Clean the sheets, get fresh towels, get the kitchen, all of it. Yeah. I love all of that.
Mm-hmm. So I know that the topic of conversation is a big one because this is what we do all day long. And I think we're doing less of it lately because we're texting each other and we're not having as many face-to-face conversations as we should have. And I think that we're not asking enough meaningful questions with one another. I sat next to a guy last night at a dinner, and he said, I was hoping to connect with my friend, and I was going to wait for him to ask me a question about my life, and then I was going to respond with a very intentional answer. We talked for 2 hours, and he never asked me one question about myself.
Oh, I know. That is the problem. That's what I did this. I talked to my students today about it. They say, yeah, I went on a date. The guy did not ask me one question, or I've been, in my fraternity for 3 years. The brothers don't know anything about my life. It's a big problem. Interpersonal curiosity Forbes magazine said it was the #1 professional development skill for young people to develop right now.
Mm-hmm. And there's so many people suffering from isolation and loneliness, and they're just so hungry for a connection that is meaningful. So I would love for you to talk a little bit from your book, The 6 Conversations. Dr. Heather Holleman is my guest, of the 4 mindsets of a loving conversation.
Yes, as I was doing all the research to try to figure out how to create warm connections with people, I learned that in any conversation, you want to do four things. You want to be curious, believe the best, express concern, and share your life. And if one of those is missing, you're not going to have a warm connection with people. So, what I love teaching students and anywhere I travel, churches, ministries, companies, you move people through those mindsets to figure out, where am I deficient? Where can I grow as a conversationalist? The two things that people are most deficient at is curiosity or believing the best about people, especially like in a tense climate, political, social climate. They are nervous, they are judging people, they don't want to believe the best about them.
Hmm. I heard recently that you can't hate someone if you know their story. And
I
you
do, yeah, I do love that quote. Go
yeah,
ahead.
and you can't know someone's story unless you're curious.
Right. I told my students today, if someone's disagreeing with you politically, rather than staying in the realm of argument, one thing you can do is say, hey, I can tell you care so passionately about this position or this candidate. I would love to know the story behind when you first started caring about this. And I told my students, stay in the realm of narrative, not argument. Just stay in the realm of storytelling. You're forming a warm connection. You're getting to know each other. And once you know someone's story, you're actually in a responsive brain state rather than a reactive brain state, and you're much more likely to even change your mind about things.
Hmm. You
So
know,
they love that.
yeah. When you when I first had you on talking about this book, you said, and this really changed me, is your brain hates how are you?
Oh, it does. It is. I told my students, I just finished giving this presentation to them, and I'm known at Penn State as for my love of vivid verbs. I'm most known for this kind of research behind the power of the strong verb. When you use a weak verb like are, so how are you? How was the weekend? It's a verb that does not activate what's called mirror neurons in the brain, meaning
Mm,
your brain cannot picture it. So it's creating a cognitive load. It creates too much stress on your brain to try to figure out the answer to that question. So you can even do it in real time with a person. If you say, how are you? They'll say, or if you say, how was your day? They'll say, fine. But if you put a strong verb in there like, hey, did anything surprise you about your day? In real time, you can see someone's eyes light up and they'll say, oh, yeah, it really surprised me today that my grandma actually sent me a gift card and the recipe for her homemade stromboli. I was really surprised about that.
hmm.
But you would never get that if you said, how was your day? So I always like to test people and show it in real time if I'm doing a workshop because you can see how the brain lights up. Now, in writing, it's the same thing. Get rid of the weak verbs because you want to have verbs that create a mood and an image for the brain.
Hmm.
I know it's a grammar lesson with Dr. Holleman.
Well, it is, but it's also I have changed the way I've tried to ask questions because if I give someone a question that they're animated about answering, I think it keeps the conversation going.
Well, it does, and it makes them excited. I mean, I was even learning more about questions that release dopamine that are kind of inherently pleasurable. So you can put words in there that people enjoy. Like if I said, hey, what's been the highlight of your September bill? Or if I said, people love to talk about food and new experiences. So if you say like, "Hey, have you tried any new restaurants?"
Hmm.
Your brain wants to answer questions like that. It's fun. Apparently, it's they're more pleasurable questions when you ask that. So, what's your good news? What new thing have you tried, or something like that? It just makes it easier for people to answer, and they are happy to answer those questions.
And Heather, I love the question, what's the story behind? Because boy,
Yes.
does that open up the floodgates for conversation.
It really does. And one trick is if you ask someone to tell you, like, say you compliment them and they're wearing a beautiful suit, you can say, I love that suit. I would love to know the story behind that suit. Listen to what category of conversation they like to talk in. If they tell you all about the people related to that suit, who they were with when they bought it, that person may enjoy social conversations talking about people. If they talk about the fabric, the process, how it was put together, they may like physical processes. That's the category, physical conversations. If they talk about the decision making that went into it, they may like volitional categories of conversation. I've learned so much since even writing this book, Bill, about how to become a
Cool.
better conversationalist.
I love that. So,
Hmm.
I mean, I want to talk about the six conversations because one day I will have these completely memorized. Right now, I'm usually 4 out of 6, but hopefully after today, I'll be 6 out of 6 because I
Well,
do
which
love
ones are you forgetting? Which ones do you always forget?
to
Because there's social, physical,
social,
emotional,
yeah, volitional,
cognitive.
spiritual,
Hmm. Yeah, you're forgetting the cognitive. Just remember,
cognitive.
people like to ask. People love it, especially professors in my world. Like, if I just was meeting with two colleagues right after my class, and instead of saying, "How are you?" I love to say, because they're professors, I'll say, "Okay, tell me what you've been thinking about most today."
Oh, that's so
Because
interesting.
they're researchers. They're
Yeah,
thinking about the world of ideas. And so that I knew that question would bless them. It's a loving way to interact with people.
yeah. And you break patterns when you give someone a question to answer that they know they can elaborate on.
Yes, and the volitional category is your best friend if you're traveling or meeting strangers. So today, the example I gave was a new student was in my class, John, and I said, I'm going to compliment your shoes, and then I'm going to ask you, how did you decide? So I said, hey, I love that you're wearing Brooks shoes. How did you decide to buy those instead of the Nike, the On Cloud or the Hoka's? And then I made a joke. I said, a lot of people my age wear Brooks. And he said, are you saying that I'm wearing like old people shoes? To which the whole class started laughing. I was like, wait, you perceive me as being older? And it just went on and on. I was like, I am turning 50. But it was just, it can be lighthearted. Like, you can say, hey, how'd you decide to get that instead of that? I love volitional questions. How did you decide to get season tickets? How did you decide to pack your lunch today? How did you decide to live in Pennsylvania? I love volitional questions. That's the fancy word for human volition, which is agency, like decision making.
Hmm. Yeah, that gives people a chance to start to share a little bit of their story. And if they start to become a little transparent, do they also start to trust you a little bit more?
Well, the research shows they will. It's called, having a warm connection.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to see it because they'll become more willing to share their life. And it's wonderful to just see that you're establishing what's called rapport. They feel, connected to you. And so what you'll discover is you'll have great success as you have conversations because you'll begin to see people warming to you and sharing their life with you.
Hmm. Dr. Heather Holleman is my guest. So, Heather, if you are a reserved person, and I would say that might lean a little bit towards the introverts out there,
Yes.
is it helpful to give them uh, one of the challenging situations you talk about in the book is on a scale of 1 to 10, how was your day? I mean,
Yes.
that's warm and invitational because it's not
Yes.
saying how are you or how was your day. You're giving them a specific question to give you a specific answer to, and that's your brain, I think, believes that's fun.
It is, but honestly, since we wrote the book, my introverted husband, Ash, who's proof of concept, he's found an even better
Oh,
question for introverts. You're gonna love this.
all right. He's
He
not there. We
used to
can't get him
say
on right now, can we?
no, he's
Okay.
upstairs, I can
Okay.
grab him. Okay, I said he used to say to, like, cashiers or just friends or even our daughters, like, on a scale of 1 to 10, what kind of day are you having? And he liked that, and people would answer, and he'd say, "What needs to happen to make it a 10?" But recently, he will say to people, it is a weak verb, but we'll forgive him. He'll be like, "Hey, are you having a good day?" Or "Is it a good day today?" And then if a cashier or a friend or our daughter says, "Yeah, it's a good day," Ash will say, "What makes a good day for you?" And he loves it. He's had more meaningful conversations, in grocery stores, airports, wherever we are, because the people will say, "It's a good day for me if I've talked to my mom." And then Ash will say, "Well, tell me about your mom. Like, does she live in town?" Or, "It's a good day if I get a great cup of coffee." Ash will say, "Oh, tell me what beans you're using. Do you roast them yourself?" And he's an introvert. These things do not come natural. So I love observing him say, is it a good day for you? And the person's like, yeah, I'm having a great day. And then he'll say, what makes a good day for you?
Wow. And usually you're going to always get a reply that's going to continue the conversation.
Well, yeah, that's what the genius of the six conversations was for us is it's not the first question that actually matters. Anyone can ask a first question. You can memorize all kinds of first questions. It's the endless combinations. Um, permutations, if you will. So, for example, Penn State, we have a huge whiteout football game this weekend. It's a big deal. College game day will be here. So, Monday morning, I'm going to say to my students, did you go to the game? They're going to say yes. And I might think I'm stuck. What's my next move? Well, I have 6 questions. Social. Okay, tell me who you tailgated with. Who'd you hang out with? I could do emotional. Okay, tell me how you felt about that third quarter. I could do physical. How was it being in the stands that whole time? I know it was raining. Did you get cold? I can do a cognitive. Tell me what you were thinking about. I can do volitional. How did you decide which tailgate to go to? How did you decide to get season tickets? How did whatever? Spiritual. Tell me, were you praying in that fourth quarter? Did you use any spiritual rituals? Like my friends who are, Eagles fans, I'm in like huge love of sports, and it's natural to be like, okay, do you have any like game day rituals? Do you bring your spiritual life into it? So then you're in the second question, and then remember, you're sharing your life. I talk about the 3 kind of goals of conversation. You're always thinking about 3 things. Can I encourage this person? Can I help them in their goals? Can we be in a state of marveling together? So you kind of can quickly have a conversation, wrap it up in a meaningful way, and you'll have a warm connection with someone.
Dr. Heather Holleman is my guest, and we're going to take a short break. If you have a question or comment, it's very welcome. You can text it over 877-933-2484. Again, 877-933-2484. One of her 8 books that we're talking about today is called The 6 Conversations, Pathways to Connecting in an Age of Isolation and Incivility. We'll be right back. It is my deepest desire that you take the very first step of faith by placing your faith and trust in Jesus Christ. If you've got questions about what it means to begin a relationship with Jesus, text the word faith to 41224. Back with Dr. Heather Holleman today, and I'm already looking at the text line, Heather. Let's see here. I really like when Heather is on, as I learn something. I try to be a good listener, but with certain people, only I get one-word answers despite my asking open-ended questions. So it sounds like there's some frustration out there with folks that have a hard time with people they're communicating with. They're being gracious with their questions, and they're still getting little choppy answers. Any advice there?
Well, yes, 2 things I'm learning is it's actually getting worse sometimes because I think people are used to monologuing on social media that when they're asked a meaningful question in real time, in person, sometimes they don't know how to just have a longer, on the spot answer. Well, one thing I've been doing when I ask people questions and I'm only getting the one word answer and it seems like they're maybe guarded or they just can't think of what to say, I do what's called putting bells on it, which means draw attention to the very problem that you are having in conversation and make that the topic of conversation. So I'll say to my friend, hey, it seems like I'm only getting one word answers from you. Is it just not a good day? Am I asking the wrong questions? Or I'll say, is there any question that you're secretly hoping I'll ask you? And then they might say, actually, I'm just not good at thinking of things to say. And then I'll say, this is what I'll say. Have you always been that way?
Oh.
Now, when you say to someone, have you always been that way? You are going to get a story of when a conversation went bad for them and they have not felt good contributing in conversation. Every time I say, well, tell me, have you always been that way? They might say, well, yeah, I was actually a huge talker growing up, and my family really shamed me. And I was told that I just talk too much and I monologue and I'm terrible. And everyone, made fun of me for interrupting. So ever since then, I haven't really been good in conversation. You'll never know what you're going to get. So if you're really struggling in conversation, sometimes I draw attention to the problem and make that the topic of conversation, and you can actually have a really warm connection. So a good example is if you ask a question and someone bristles and you think you've offended offended them or you've been rude, make that the topic of conversation. Just say, "Oh, I noticed that you just like reacted a little. Did I say something that wasn't right or did I say something that made you feel awkward?" And then again, you're going to have a really warm connection. Sometimes the word answers is because you also have maybe asked a question that is really meaningful and deep and they need more time to think about it. So you can just say that. Just say, "Are you given a one word answer because I really gave you something to think about there?" and see what they say.
Oh, so good. All right, another comment. Great show today. I work with the senior high youth group, boys, and this topic has come up for me time and time again. I have a desire to help young men become better at everyday conversations. What baby steps could I take to start down that path? I'm definitely looking to buy Heather's book.
Well, you can buy the book. If you actually go to the Seated and Sent website, you can get some free resources. I have a little worksheet that the youth group may love to look at. It sort of summarizes the 6 conversations. I think if you put your address in there, you can even get a free download of the first few chapters. But the best thing to do is to, first of all, convince these young men that this is the number one thing they can do for their mental health, for professional development, for their spiritual health. Everything in the 6 conversations comes out of Philippians 2, Romans 12, and Galatians 6. I know we're talking a lot of social science on this interview, but it's all really rooted in the Bible. So it's kind of the best discipleship material you can do with the high school group. Okay, so my best advice is to give these young men a couple of questions that kind of always work well, especially if they're um, maybe in a situation that makes them feel awkward. Maybe they're not comfortable talking to adults. Maybe they're on a date or going to prom or something, whatever it is. Just give them a couple questions that always work. So for my husband, it always works for him to say, "Okay, has it been a good day?" And then remember the follow up, "What makes a good day for you?" Um, don't forget the compliment. If you're with someone, compliment, like if it's a dating situation, compliment her. And again, say, "Tell me the story behind that dress," or jewelry. You can never go wrong complimenting jewelry and asking for
Hmm.
the story. I was working at the church info desk and I tried that. Everyone who came by, I said, "I love that ring. Tell me the story." I have more friends now, Bill, from the "tell me the story of your jewelry." Um, the other thing with high schoolers is remind them what the research of the Yale Relationship Lab says, and that is this: you think you are awkward and embarrassing yourself. The research shows that even if you ask questions that seem weird or inappropriate, your conversation person ends up liking you more just because you tried to engage them. So even if you're like, "Oh, this is so embarrassing," you're overestimating what people are thinking about you in terms of negative things. The research
Hmm.
shows they actually like you. So, um, yeah, and just it takes practice. When you start to have more success with it. And the other thing I recommend, Ash and I do, it's not ready now, but we're going to do some conversation training modules. And one thing we've been doing at a local coffee shop in our town is every week we do what was called a conversation cafe, where so gather the boys together, teach for 20 minutes on maybe one of the 4 mindsets, and then actually let them practice in groups, being curious about other people, asking the next question to extend the conversation, and then ending in a place of encouragement, helping people with their goals or leading to a state of marveling. And you can actually do that even if it's something superficial, like, "Oh, tell me about, fantasy football," or whatever the boys are interested in your area. If it's school, if it's sports, if they're into the arts, whatever it is, just get them to talk about those things and practice.
Hmm. Now, I know you're a sports fan, but if you imagine getting really great seats on the 50-yard line for an awesome game, you go into those seats, Heather, and you think, this is amazing. This is so great. So how do we take that emotion, that feeling that you're having on the 50-yard line, and turn that into how we feel about sharing Christ with others?
Oh, look at that. Well, after you have all the 6 conversation tools, guess what's going to happen?
What?
You are going to get so excited
Mm.
because you are going to be able to talk about Jesus in a way that doesn't ever again feel like a sales pitch or an awkward pivot in the conversation, because you already have a warm connection and you are just sharing your life. So, for example, with my colleagues when I'm talking about, hey, what have you guys been thinking about? We have a warm connection. When they say to me, Heather, what about you? What have you been thinking about? I'll say, actually, you guys, I just read the book of Haggai and Zechariah. I am like going crazy over stuff I'm learning in the Bible.
Mm,
Nobody thinks
like
it's
that.
weird. Nobody thinks it's weird. The idea of living a sent life. So, my two favorite verbs in scripture are that we're seated. That comes from Ephesians 2. So that your identity, you already have a seat at the greatest table with the greatest king. You're not living in jealousy and comparison. You're not insecure. You're not self-conscious. What happens then? You get to live out Ephesians 2:10 that God has good works prepared in advance for you to do. It changed my life forever when I realized that the number one way Jesus describes the Father in the book of John is the Father who sent me. So this is the most important thing that Jesus is calling to mind about his own identity in the book of John. So when you imagine the chills you get when you get to John 20:21, where Jesus says, as the Father has sent me, so I send you. That means you have a sent identity. It's not about learning evangelism. You're not doing things for Jesus. You're doing things with Jesus. And what is he doing? He's seeking and saving the lost. So this is now part of your identity. It's who you are. And what I love about living this sent life is every day you get to wake up and this is what you get to say. God, send me to be the answer to someone's prayer today. Send me to be a blessing, like an agent of blessing or proclamation. It makes life a supernatural adventure to just be like, God, I will tell people about you. It's a wonderful way to live. It makes life really exciting and supernatural for me. So that's why I wrote the book Sent, Living a Life That Invites Others to Jesus, which I co wrote with Ash because he's my introverted husband who claims he does not have the gift of evangelism. And yet he led two people on our street to the Lord. He meets every Wednesday and does discipleship
Mm,
with the new dad who just prayed to receive Christ. It's like the coolest life ever. And you get to be with Jesus doing what Jesus is doing.
yeah, fantastic. Heather, here's another question came in on the text line. What do you do about people who talk constantly and they don't let other people enter into the conversation?
Yes, what you need to do is just it's okay to interrupt at that point and just say, "Hey, let's do some conversational turn taking." It's a skill people need to learn. Like you could even blame it on yourself. Just be like, "I have a hard time like I have a hard time listening for long periods of time. Can we break this story up a little bit or could I share right now?" It is okay to let your conversation partner know how you're experiencing them. If it's someone that's always that way, you can say to them, "Hey, I'm reading this book called The Six Conversations, and they talk about how each person shouldn't take more than 2 minutes to share in a conversation. Let's do that together." I've done that. I have a friend that monologues and she'll go on for, I mean, if I let her, she would probably talk for an hour. So you just have to let them know. And it's gracious. Just like, look, I know you like to talk a lot. You have high articulation needs. It's okay to let people know, like, I experience you as kind of talking for long periods of time. Let's do better at conversational turn taking.
I
I don't
heard,
know. Does that seem rude? Does that seem like too much?
well, no, because if you say it lovingly and truthfully, no, I think you've stated your truth. When I heard Dennis Prager say once, speak for 4 sentences and then stop talking to see if anyone else wants to talk or to see if anyone's still listening.
That's right. Yes. Yes. Yep.
Because
I mean, you could time yourself to see if you're someone that talks a lot. I mean, a lot of sometimes though, I don't mind when people talk a lot because one thing I learned, actually the best thing I learned in all the research for writing the six conversations, the best thing I learned, Bill, was how to listen. And it's like a treasure hunt for me because nobody ever taught me what I was listening for. And what you're listening for as people talk is you're listening for their core values and patterns of things they like to talk about. So, my friend who likes to talk forever and ever and ever, I like to kind of, it doesn't bother me right now because I like to listen. And then I'll say, you know what? As you were talking, I noticed how much you mentioned whether or not you were being productive or not. You really value efficiency and productivity. Have you always been that way? You know what I mean? It's kind of fun to listen to patterns. So that's kind of the new thing I've been learning as a conversationalist. But yeah, if you're listening and you're someone who talks a lot, it's time to time yourself just to be aware. how if you're monologuing. Yep.
Hmm. I like it. Dr. Heather Holleman is my guest. She's a teaching professor at Penn State, a speaker and author. You can learn more about her at her website, heatherholleman.com. She spells her last name Holleman. If you have a question or comment, the text line is open, 877-933-2484. Be right back with Heather. Welcome to the show. If you just tuned in, I hope you've had a great day. And if you're climbing into your car and getting your seatbelt on and starting your drive home, I'm talking to Dr. Heather Holleman, and we're chatting about a couple of her books. I got a question, Heather, that said, "Hey, Bill, how did you discover Heather?"
Ooh,
And
how did you?
Well, I want to say Seated with Christ came into the studio, and it was living freely in a culture of comparison. And I thought, this would be a good book. So I went through it, and I thought, well, let's get her on. And then you just became a star after that.
So was that 2015? Have we been friends for 10 years?
No.
I bet. Okay.
I don't believe so. I've only been on the air for about 8, so maybe
Okay.
17 it showed up, or it was
That's wonderful.
Yeah,
Well, I wrote it in 2015, so that makes sense if I came on a couple years later. But
yeah.
no, I love that book. And that book did change my life because it put me, suddenly I became a public speaker, which I didn't realize that when you write a book, people invite you to speak about it. And what's so funny is I trained in 7th grade to become a competitive orator. Like I competed in and I never knew how God would use that.
Yeah.
I was like a national debater. So the Lord does not waste anything. And I just read in Psalm 119 today that all things serve him. So even if you think that something's wasted, no, all things serve him and his plan. And I just love looking back at my life and seeing how he started to work to prepare me for some of the things I'm doing. I don't know if you feel that way about comedy or being on the radio. Like you can see how he worked it through your life, you know? I
Absolutely,
love
I
stuff
have.
like
Yes. And I've written jokes on napkins, and then people have invited me to come tell jokes.
that. Yeah.
So it's a little bit the same.
Yes. I
Yeah.
love it.
So Seated with Christ, just remind people in a couple of minutes how significant it is that we are seated at the table in heaven. We have a place, and we
Yes.
belong, and our identity is in him.
Yes. Well, it was a summer day in late July when I read Ephesians 2:6, which just says this: God raised us up with Christ and seated us with him in the heavenly realms in Christ Jesus. And Bill, I couldn't believe a couple things. Number one, it's a past tense verb, meaning it's already happened to us. And Paul is most likely writing from a Roman prison. And I looked that verb tense up in the Greek and I was like, wait, he's saying that something is partially true about us right now and will be fulfilled fully in eternity with the Lord. But he was picturing himself in this seat with Jesus. He reiterates that in Colossians when he says, fix your mind not on earthly things, but, on things above where Christ is seated at the right hand of God. So I went on a journey to understand what it would mean to understand I was already seated at the greatest table with the greatest king. And it changed my life forever because that day in my journal, I felt like the Holy Spirit was using that verse to tell me I do not live as if I have a seat at the table. I'm living as if I'm fighting for a seat at whatever table I think is going to
Ooh,
bring
that's-
abundant life for me. And I made a list of like 10 tables, like, oh, if only I get an invitation to, be thinner and more pretty, or, if only we were wealthier, if I lived in this kind of house. And I realized that as I approached 40 years old, I was just living in jealousy and comparison. But when you realize you're seated with Jesus and that has been settled and you're at this, you know, position with him of royalty and righteousness and rest, it's beautiful. And then you can start living like a seated person. And I talk about the 3 A's, which are you have access to all the riches of God's kingdom instead of fighting for a seat of affluence. You are radiant, meaning you know that you're adoring him, and that's what it says in the Psalms, those who look to him are radiant. So you're not fighting for a seat of appearance. I do a lot of alliteration. And then the last one is you will fight for a seat at the table through achievement, but seated people know they have they're going to abide. That's the verb. We abide and bear the fruit that God has ordained for our life. So it sets you free from jealousy and comparison. I love that book because it moves through all the ways you're fighting for a seat and how God can kind of break those strongholds so you can enjoy a life of freedom with Him.
Wouldn't comparison and jealousy almost be an epidemic today?
Well, yes, and I wrote the book right when I think Instagram was starting to come. I mean, I didn't raise my children with social media because it didn't really exist. And so now the comparison is so difficult. Oh my word. Students are thinking, where's my perfect life? Why don't I have this kind of money, these kind of clothes? I mean, TikTok, all of it. So they have to really get a sense of where is true life found? Where the question young people are answering is, what does the good life look like? And so when you tell people, look, you are seated with Jesus and he is the source of abundant life. Everything you're searching for is actually fulfilled in him, your relationship with him. And so we're running to things that we think are going to bring us life, but Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. He is the source of abundant life. That's the verse that brought me to him in college was John 10:10,
Hmm.
where he says, I have come that you may have life and have it abundantly, because I was just fighting for a seat for through achievement, affluence, and appearance.
Yeah, wow. I appreciate that honesty, Heather. Here's another question on the text line. Do you have any advice for talking with a good friend about something you're passionate about and they say they're completely not interested in it?
And this is a good friend. I can't imagine a good friend saying
Well,
that.
there's
I
more. It
understand.
says, an example, I'm building a huge orchid. My good friend says that I don't like trees.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
care about
Well,
this. Let's not discuss it.
yes.
Ouch.
Okay. I would say, and this is kind of fun, and I've read different books about this. It's okay to have multiple kinds of friends, like lots of different friends in your life. Because, for example, I love orchids. I'm raising them right now. I have 3 that I've kept for like 10 years. I love talk. I will talk to you about orchids. If that's what I heard you right. Did you say it was an orchid?
Yeah.
Okay. Here's an example. I love to talk about grammar
Orchard.
and
Orchard. I'm sorry.
or
Orchard.
orchard. Okay,
Orchard. Yeah.
orchard. Yeah. No, I love trees. I actually have a plum and a peach that I'm growing. So I am someone that loves to talk about that kind of stuff. But I have friends in my life that is not what they want to talk about. I have friends that do not want to talk about grammar or vivid verbs with me. That's why, think
Hmm.
about this. That's why Gary Chapman who wrote the 4 love languages. He liked to talk about conversations as love languages. And so, what I would challenge the friend who doesn't want to talk about trees, if your love language is talking about your physical property and the trees, it's a loving thing for her to be the kind of friend that figures out a way to be curious about those trees. And so, if she's not interested in it, you could say, well, what could I do to make you see the beauty of this, to make you get as excited as I am? And it's interesting. I mean, it's hard when people say they don't have an interest in something, because then I really push them to think of, okay, think about curiosity and getting as curious as you can about this topic. So I would say you could also be honest and say, I want to connect with you about this. Is there any way I can help you marvel about trees like I have? And just see what she says.
Hmm. All right, Heather, I've got another question. When I was looking through the 6 conversations, there was a line you said, if we really care about changing people's minds, we have a much greater chance of engaging them if we stop mocking them.
Yes.
I
Oh
don't know what that
gosh.
means, but I want to learn more.
Well, I mean, we're kind of in a culture right now, at least, of just mocking people. And we feel like that is what conversation is. Like, my job is to point out and mock you and shame you and cancel you and tell you all the ways that you're wrong. I mean, and I'm on a college campus, so these kind of things are heightened. And so we think that that's productive civic engagement. It is not productive because the research shows that nobody changes their mind when they are being mocked. What would be much more productive is to say, we disagree on this. Let's talk about how we got to where we are. I want to know this. Remember what we talked about? I want to know the story behind why you believe this. Or, it's this idea of just being loving and believing the best. I mean, Romans 12 is actually deeply convicting. And I was talking to my students about it today. I said, look, I know you want to push back on this, that why would you believe the best about people who you think are holding like reprehensible views? I said, what if you saw every person in your life as worthy of love? They have dignity. They have a one of a kind point of view on the universe. And you don't know if your interaction with them could change your life forever. You don't know what they're going to teach you. And so approach this person not as your enemy, but as someone who could teach you. Now, when I'm speaking to Christian audiences, I love this line because it helped me. When you're dealing with someone that's very difficult, and you're angry and you think they're the enemy. I had a therapist tell me once, Heather, people are not the enemy. Satan is the enemy. You're kind of fighting the wrong battle. There's like a
Hmm.
higher ground to take here. So, yeah, mockery, shame, cancel culture, these things are terrible for anyone. They're terrible at the micro level in friendships and families. They're terrible as a nation. Shame it sends people into hiding. I did my dissertation at the University of Michigan on the emotion of shame. I was looking at it through the lens of 19th century literature, but what happened was I learned that shame is the most tormenting emotion a person can experience. And we are in a shame culture right now. And it breaks my heart. That's why my dream is for people to come together in civil ways, believe the best about each other, be curious, and learn how to have a warm connection. And that's how people change their mind in conversation.
Oh, so good. Dr. Heather Holleman is my guest. The book we're chatting about is The Six Conversations, Pathways to Connecting in an Age of Isolation and Incivility. We're going to take one more short break. And if you want to send a question over, the text line is open, 877-933-2484. We'll be right back with Heather. We carry each other's burdens. Please know you can bring us your prayer concerns and we will pray. Share your prayer requests with the Faith Radio team by texting or calling 877-933-2484 or share your prayer requests with the Faith Radio staff and listeners at myfaithradio.com. Welcome to the show. Dr. Heather Holleman is my guest. And she's written 8 books, but right now I'm going to try to get as much as I can in this last 12 minutes or so. Heather, when we're in a challenging situation and we're dealing with a hurting or grieving person, which it seems that we're always doing that at some level, one of the questions you ask or suggest to ask is, how does this show up in your body? Because we carry everything in our body. And when I ask that kind of question, usually I get oh, well, thank you. I'm not sleeping. And
Yes.
I find myself hysterically crying in the grocery store for no reason. And you go, whoa, okay. Now I feel like we're making that connection that we want to have versus how's it going?
Right. And, I'm running a grief support group. I care deeply about grieving people. I've learned a lot about grieving people. When you're with a grieving person, it is so disorienting that I actually consulted with a trauma expert and I said, how can I bless grieving people? And you're right, talking about the physical effects of grieving is important. But the other question I love, if you're with someone who is grieving, you can say this question: what thought keeps going through your mind that you can't get rid of?
Oh, that's a good one. That's a really good
Be
one.
Yeah, because sometimes we ruminate on things, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes grieving people, they might feel guilty, they might be replaying, a scene in their mind, they might have worry, and that's good for anyone who's in a distressing situation. Decision making is incredibly fatiguing for people who are grieving, so I learned not to ask questions that involve them having to make a decision. In fact, you can say to people instead of, "Hey, can I do anything for you?" No, that's stressful. Just show up with the casserole. But one thing you can ask them is, "Do you have any decisions you need to make this week and can I help you with those decisions?"
It's another great question.
Yes.
What about when we're talking to someone who won't stop complaining? Of course, that wouldn't be me. So
Yes. Well, I
I'm asking
have
for a friend.
I talk about that in the book. I have learned to say, you know what, I'm really sensitive to atmospheres of complaining, and I'm trying to be a more joyful, encouraging person and tell that person, hey, what if we tried instead to look at gratitude, look at things that are going well? And one of my friends told me there's new research coming out that if you reflect on just three things every day that you're grateful for, in 3 weeks, you will have changed your neural pathways.
I believe
You will
that.
have literally changed your brain. And so I told my students that today, and I said, look, I know it's so easy to just be negative, and there's this kind of attraction to drama. We're addicted to it. But to kind of change the environment to gratitude and rejoicing, I mean, it is very biblical. It is a command. It is God's will for us in Christ Jesus to be grateful in all circumstances. So, yeah, I would say I had to tell my friend, hey, we're complaining a lot. I'm really trying a new mental health practice of gratitude and encouragement. Do you want to do that with me? And to this day, we don't gossip or complain with each other.
Beautiful. All right. What about this question, which I love, is how do you make sense of what's happening when you're getting someone that's always complaining? And the question is, how do you make sense of what's happening?
Well, some of it is a learned behavior, and I tell my students it's a lot easier to complain. It's actually very easy to find what's wrong. It's
Very
much
easy.
harder to find what's right.
Yeah.
And so it's actually a more sophisticated, complex, clever brain state to find what's right. And it's a very redemptive way of looking at the world. Like the idea of every rejection is God's protection. There's also, you can, if people are really complaining, you can acknowledge it. But I read a book about asking better questions where a person said, you could say, oh, that sounds really hard. It sounds like, let me ask you three questions. What did this experience take from you? What can it not take from you? What gift did it give you? Reframe what they're thinking, not like, oh, it's got to be positive. All things work, together for good, which is true. That is Romans 8.
Mm-hmm.
But if someone's complaining, you want to just reframe them and say, look, I know this is really difficult. It's easy to just complain, complain, complain. What if for a second we tried to find what's going well? What if we tried to find like what is some good news we can share? Only because it's a really negative mental space that young people are in right now. And so I do like to shift it and say, okay, let's share one thing we're celebrating, one thing that's going well, because you're not receptive to learn, to grow when you're in a negative kind of rage filled brain space.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're interested in learning, if you're interested in growing, you kind of want to start thinking, okay, what's good here? How can we move on and find something good and rejoice here?
Okay. We just have a couple of minutes left, Heather. So let's talk about The Elite Seat, your new book.
My new book that just came out.
Okay.
One of the things I want to say is if you're interested in Seated with Christ, Being Sent, the 6 Conversations, I wrote those books all for adults. And so many parents said, do you have something I can give my child so they can learn these things? So I wrote so far 3 books. You've got This Seat Saved, The Disappearing Seat, and The Elite Seat, which are a fictional account of a little girl in middle school trying to find her seat in the middle school lunchroom. She realizes she's not popular, and the whole series is about how she learns that she's already seated at the best table with Jesus.
So good. Heather, always a delight. You light up the text line because people are very interested. Everybody wants to be a better conversationalist, and we're always looking for ways to improve our connection, to have warmer connections, and to feel seen and to feel like we have meaningful relationships, because at the end of the day, that's all that really matters is obedience to Christ and then the community of people in our life that we can love and share love with.
That's right. We're made for connection, and all the research shows it's how to have a happy life.
Yeah. So thank you for saying yes to coming on the show. I know you're a busy person, and like Wyatt and I always say, when you say yes to us, you're saying no to something else. So that means a lot to us.
Well, I was saying no to making my pasta sauce, which I'm headed up to make my meat sauce right now. I got to make spaghetti dinner for Ash and me, and then we're going to probably watch TV. So I got a fun night ahead of me.
Awesome. Have a great night, and thanks for being on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Heather Holleman has been my guest. You can go learn more about her at her website, heatherholleman.com. That wraps up our show for the day and for the week. Thank you for supporting Faith Radio. See you next week. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.
John O'Leary was 9 years old when this happened.
One moment, I was this normal little Midwest kid. And then in the next, I found myself in a hospital bed with burns on 100% of my body.
He was in the hospital for 5 painful months, but made a commitment that would change everything.
I would never be defined by those wounds. I would never be defined by those scars.
Hear John's incredible story on the latest episode of the Wow God Stories podcast. His passion will set your soul on fire and make you say,
Wow, God.
Wow, God.
Wow, God.
Wow God Stories, wherever you get your podcasts and at myfaithpodcasts.com.